The following will be a reading similar to the one that I did for Soul Creek. I believe it was the Whispers of Carmine, the one about Carmine, Logan's mentor, and baby Logan. It is a prologue for Planet of Ash, I believe it's called. It's a new visual novel that will be coming out soon. And this is not required reading, but, it at least gives us some backstory-ish for one of the characters. And, yeah. Anyways, so I hope you enjoy Prologue to Endeavor, Chapter 1, The Beckoning Wild. January 30th, 2322. I step into the hangar bay of Amargosa Station, and my heart skips a beat when I look up. It's a massive, wide-open space, with huge industrial steel walls looming in the distance on every side. But despite the sheer volume of openness, it somehow fails to elicit even a fraction of my shock, which is entirely stolen by the spaceship in its center. Nacelles roaring in anticipation for its first flight. I read over the ship's specs when I was first offered the assignment. Odyssey-class vessel, the fourth of its kind to be built. Max speed of 0.183 light-years per hour. 380 meters long, 140 meters wide with a 520-meter wingspan and 8 decks. Max crew complement of 200. For some reason, it didn't hit me at the time just how big that would be. It's a giant hulking metal beast, and yet it's also streamlined and elegant. Across its dorsal fin are a series of bold characters, a proud declaration of its name, Endeavor. Noel? I hear, accompanied by a light tap on my shoulder, startling me a bit. I turn around and I am reminded that my mother's been standing there this whole time, my duffel bag swung over my shoulder. She'd insisted on helping me carry my things. She looks up at the ship and smiles, realizing where I was gandering. Mesmerized? Intimidated, I say, correcting her. Seeing it right before my eyes is so different from looking at pictures of it. I'm kind of speechless. You've seen spaceships before, the Cody says with a chuckle. I roll my eyes. I've flown them before. It's just... I sigh and sag my shoulders, turning my head briefly for another glimpse of Endeavor. It's my ship, my first assignment, and I'll be living on that thing for years. I cast my eyes downward as a sudden wave of dread passes through me. Am I making a mistake? No, my mother says. She reaches for my hand, clasping them firmly between her own. My precious little Noel. I'm not so little anymore, am I? I say awkwardly, my hand still trapped. I look up slightly, meeting her gaze. Exactly, she says. I may not feel ready to let you go, but that's not up to me. I don't think that we'd be right here right now if you didn't know that this was your path. Her eyes shimmer kindly against the pronounced dark mask of fur around them, and her narrow muzzle curls into a resolute smile. I know her well enough to sense the facade, though. She wants to cry, but she won't. At least not where anyone else can see. She never lets other people see her cry. Suddenly my own face is wet with tears. No, she says again, dropping my bag and throwing her arms around me, squeezing me tightly. Seja corajoso. Be brave. After a moment in her embrace, she pulls away slightly, looking me in the eyes again, and stay in touch. I sniffle and force a smile. Of course I will. She picks my duffel bag back up, handing it over to me, and taking a big step back. You wouldn't want to be left behind. You should get going. I nod, taking my things and slowly walking towards Endeavor's airlock. I wave goodbye to her and make a heart with my hands. She responds by blowing me a kiss. Then turning around one last time, I make my way into the ship. By the time that I emerge into Endeavor's corridors, my slight crying has evolved into a full-on sobbing. I had my face in my hands, desperate to mask the waterworks as I scurry down the halls of my new home. My new home, I ponder softly. I'll be spending the next 4 years of my life here. Fuck, why am I doing this? Exploring the galaxy can't be worth feeling this shitty. My crying intensifies. I need to get to my quarters before this gets even worse. Having collided with another body, I stumble back a few feet and clumsily fall to the ground, bottom first. Oi, there you are, Enzo exclaims. The small-bodied hawk reaches down, offering an arm to help pull me up. I grab on and let him do most of the work, feeling too weak and inept to use the muscles in my legs. You should really watch where you're going, Noel. Enzo's wearing a big smile, like usual, but it swiftly dissipates into a frown as he gets a better look at me. It's a good thing that I found you. It looks like you could use a familiar face right about now. You... Yes, I sob, weeping my tears from my eyes. Oh God, Enzo. I know, he says softly. The only reason I'm not crying too is because I got all of mine out of the way last night. He pulls me into a tight hug. My glasses creak quietly, bending against the contours of his shoulder. I can't help but continue crying, but at least this time, the thoughts of why the hell am I doing this are replaced with the familiar embrace of a close friend. After holding me for a short while, he pulls away and gives me another smile. Can I help carry your things? Sure, I reply, my sadness adequately tempered. I hand the duffel bag to him and keep my backpack on. Then I pass him by and give him a little wave, motioning for him to follow along. Thinking back, I last saw him about 2 weeks ago. Our two families having always been pretty close, went out to eat together during one of our last few nights at Rio. I recall him wearing a cute, colorful button-up, khaki shorts and his usual red-tinted glasses, looking all snazzy and flamboyant. Now he's wearing his uniform, navy blue pants and vest with green trim, marking his division as science, as well as white undershirt. He's kept the same glasses, though. I suppose it's always been his signature flair. We make it to my quarters within a couple of minutes of walking. I pry the door open and... It's nothing fancy, Enzo says with a chuckle. Mine are pretty much the same, just on the starboard side and one level up. I throw my backpack to the ground, then take a moment to gander the room. There is a small table, a chair, and a few large storage cabinets along the wall to my left, as well as a few crates, some more of my belongings which the movers likely dropped off within the past hour. A door to my right leads to a miniature full bathroom, sandwiched between a state-of-the-art digital monitor and an old-fashioned corkboard in a way that strikes me as funny. Across from the entrance is a berth-like mattress, cubby with purple sheets and pillows, lying parallel to a large window. Looking out, all I see is the dark metal wall of the hangar bay. Better view or worse? I say half jokingly. About the same. But I suppose that we won't know for sure until we left off in a few minutes. I mumble. I take a seat on the side of my bed, then pat the empty space beside me invitingly. Enzo drops the duffel bag in the corner, then sits. He heaves a big sigh. You know, I'm glad you're here. I look at him. Is that so? He nods, his eyes fixed on the floor in front of him. We'll be spending the next 4 years here, with 185 fellow explorers that we've never met, out beyond the boundaries of known space. We've got a big task ahead of us, forging an entirely new social environment in the place of all the ties that we've been leaving behind. We'll need each other if we're to survive out here. Then he turns to face me, a warm smile on his face. I'm glad that I at least know you. Having a friend here already makes everything feel a little less daunting. I smile back, blushing a little. I'm glad that I have you here too. But, related to that, can I ask for a favor perhaps? Would you like me to help introduce you to my friends once I make them? Because I'm more socially adept than you? He asks nonchalantly. Well, no, hey, I stutter out. Don't just assume that I would have phrased it like that. Enzo giggles. No, you asked me that exact question on our first day at the academy. I sigh and turn my head, trying to hide my blush. So I did. I'd be happy to introduce you to anyone I meet, no. But I want you to try and make your own friends too. Can you at least try? He asks, smiling earnestly. I think you'll be surprised by how easily you can manage it. I nod, knowing he has a good point. 2.5 years older than you, and yet you're the one dispensing wisdom. Enzo lets out a noise, something between a chuckle and a scoff. Is that so bad? Yes. Apologize for being sociable and prodigious, I say indigenously. It's damaging to my self-image. We stare at each other for a brief moment, before inevitably cracking up. In truth, I know he's not all that wise. He's almost famously naive at times, in fact. It's just that his smarts and confidence tend to mask it pretty well. Silence falls between us for a few minutes. I can't think of anything else to say, but I also don't feel pressured to. It's nice to just sit here in my friend's presence, focusing on the serenity of an otherwise empty room. A soft whirl reverberates throughout the ship as the engines start firing full throttle. I watch the window intently as Endeavour starts to move. The metal walls of Amargosa glide by and out of view, revealing a vast sea of stars. Enzo watches along with me, sighing. "Damn," he mutters. "I think your view is better." January 31st, 2322. I briskly make my way down the halls of Deck 1, fidgeting nervously with my D3. Its screen is still on, displaying my current duty list, which just has one item on it. Flight Division meeting, 800 hours. Briefing room C. I'm not gonna be late. I probably won't even have much to talk. Why am I so nervous? I think to myself accusingly. Be calm, Noel. Ensign Grilly, welcome, says an old capybara with a big, fatherly smile on his face. He's standing in front of the briefing room's entrance, with a demeanor so humble that it takes me a moment to remember he is the captain of the damned ship. Captain Osborne, I stutter out. It's, a pleasure, sir, Osborne nods, maintaining his smile. He reaches his hand out and I hesitantly give him mine. He gives it a firm shake. The pleasure's all mine. I must insist that you relax, Ensign. I didn't mean to put you on edge. I nod. Yes, sir. I just, wasn't expecting to meet you so soon. The captain shrugs. Well, it wouldn't be just for me to forego an introduction to each member of my crew, would it? I figured that since every division is hosting a meeting today, it would be an ideal opportunity. That makes sense, sir, I say stupidly, failing to come up with a better response. I look forward to serving under you. The capybara nods in agreement. I'm afraid that I must be off, as other matters require my attention. Though, in the coming days, I plan on scheduling longer meetings in my private office for all members of the crew. I'll see you then, if not sooner. Aye, sir. Thank you, I say. Osborne smiles and walks away the same way that I came, his hands folded neatly behind his back. Remembering why I'm even here, I hurry into the briefing room. Ensign Grilly, says a man standing at the podium against the far wall. Am I correct? Yes, sir, I say with a nod. I recognize his face from the personnel report that I read. He's Lieutenant Tamron Keori, Endeavor's senior pilot. He is the first Ke Envano that I've ever met, a race from a planet that's supposedly very hot. He looks fairly lizard-like, but with scales that are almost perfectly white and several pairs of horn-like things that curl around his head. Around the table in front of him, it would appear that all my fellow pilots are already gathered. Keori nods. You're late, Ensign. Shocked, I frantically glance at my D3. 801 hours, it reads. Well, it was just a minute, sir. I say my words stumbling out of my mouth clumsily. It was, you see, Captain Osborne. He was right outside and... Yes, whatever. Just take a seat, please. Keori says coldly, his faint yellow eyes fixed downwards on his D3. Blushing in embarrassment, I take a seat, trying to avoid making eye contact with anyone. This is everyone, then? Asks the tall Lilith Fox sitting near Keori. Who's at the helm right now? Commander Ishmael, Keori answers. Captain Osborne told me that he has piloting experience and offered to have him take the helm during our meeting, so that we could all attend. The Fox nods. That's nice. There is a brief silence. Well, I suppose a round of introductions are in order. Keori grumbles, clearly harboring a distaste for the process. Name, rank, previous assignments, and any other pertinent information. Marco, care to start? He gestures to the Fox. Callum Marco, Lieutenant, junior grade, the Fox says plainly and promptly, glancing around to everyone in the room. I previously served in the Miranda and Callisto, both science vessels like this one. It is a pleasure to be here. We go around the circle, introducing ourselves just like that. After the fox is Ensign Fuller, a ram, followed by Ensign Min Kyu, a hare. No, Grilly, Ensign, I say. I'm, fresh out of the academy. No previous assignments. Ensign Milo Gray, says a stocky fellow sitting next to my left. I previously flew interstellar passenger shuttles. Looking him up and down, I can't quite place his species. His facial features seem much like that of a bovine or a cervine, but the rest of the appearance leaves me scratching my head. His smallish antlers, or are they horns, are a deep black and his fur is dark gray, with a fluffy turquoise mane that looks natural. He's definitely not Terran, or at least not fully. Perhaps some kind of hybrid? The last few officers introduced themselves as Krillith, Enir, Nikao. Good, now that we all know each other. Kiori begins. He taps on the screen of his D3 a few times. I'm sending each one of you a rotation schedule for the helm, shuttlecrafts, and all our other duties. If there are any issues, let me know. My D3 emits a soft ping. A moment later, opening my duty list, I see my schedule. Oh, sir? I say, raising my hand slightly. Kiori looks at me expectantly but says nothing. I should mention that I've never flown a large exploratory cruiser like Endeavour before. Or anything like it, really. Aside from a few simulations. Kiori stares at me blankly, letting silence hover in the air for a long, painful moment. All right then, he says, jotting down some notes on his D3. You'll be relegated to shuttlecraft duty until further notice, Grilly. I'll adjust the helm rotations accordingly. My apologies, sir, I say. Kiori shakes his head. It's fine. I just figured a state-of-the-art ship like Endeavour would be fully stacked with experienced officers. I cast my eyes downward, curling up slightly. Well, Gray begins hesitantly. The mission application said that they were available for any commissioned Union officer and even encouraged new blood, if I remember correctly. A mission like this ought to be a valuable learning experience for those fresh out of the academy, right? Kiori thinks for a moment, then shrugs. Sure, good point. His eyes look fatigued. The group talks for a short while longer, going over the ship's schematics and other important details related to our duties. Then Kiori dismisses us. I get up from my seat and leave the briefing room and slowly start meandering down the corridor. I'm content to just go back to my quarters and lie around in a well of depression. Just before I make it to the lift, though, a hand on my shoulder stops me. Hey, hold up, Gray says, having caught up with me. When I turn around to face him, he bites his lips and takes a step back. For a moment, he seems unsure of what he wants to say. Yes, sir? I ask. Oh, I'm just an ensign. No need to address me like that. He begins, shaking his head. But, I wanted to say, I'm sorry about Kiori. Some of the things that he said were perhaps a bit rude, I feel. I shrug and look down. Oh, it's fine. I'll get over it. Thank you for sticking up for me back there, though. I could train you, if you'd like. I look up at him again, surprised by the offer. At the helm? He nods. I'm sure that it wouldn't take too long if you got plenty of flying experience. There's just a lot of extra bells and whistles and things to consider when flying big ships like this. Well, that's a very considerate offer, I say. Are you sure? Grace smiles. I'm positive. Well then, I'll definitely take you up on that offer, I say. When would we start? Are you free Friday? I have a shift at the helm then, Grace says. It should be pretty uneventful since we still got a long way before we make it to the Union space. If you drop by, you can shadow me. I nod and smile. That sounds good. I'll be there. All right, Grace says. I'll see you there. He gives me a polite nod and then turns and walks the other way. I step onto the lift, a grin on my face, and my spirits lifted. He seems friendly, confident and competent at his job. I'm sure that I can learn a lot from him, I ponder. Hell, if I'm lucky, maybe I could even make a friend in the process. February 3rd, 2322. When I step onto the Endeavour's bridge, Captain Osborne greets me with a smile. Good morning, Grilly. Ensign Gray told me that you'd be here. I'll smile back and nod. Good morning, sir, and yes, of course. I make my way to the helm, where Gray is sitting, his eyes and posture both drooping slightly. Noticing me in the middle of a sip of coffee, he hurriedly puts his mug down and greets me with a pleasant "good morning." "Good morning, sir," I say again. I gesture to the coffee. We're allowed to have that on the bridge?" Gray shrugs. I wouldn't have thought so, but Osborne insisted I have some when I walked in earlier." "I see. Poor night of sleep?" Well, truth be told, I barely slept at all," Gray says with a chuckle. "I put in a request for a different mattress. 25 years old and my back is already in far worse shape than it should be, I'm afraid. But it's fine. My own fault if anything, really." I chuckle sympathetically. "I'm sorry. I hope you get a replacement soon." Gray nods in understanding. "I'm awake enough to teach you though, I promise." For the first half hour or so, I stand beside Gray while he points out various features of the console to me and explains the ins and outs of piloting Endeavour. On days like this, when we're just flying through space from point A to point B, there's barely anything that we actually have to do. Eventually, Gray gets up from his seat and offers it to me. I sit down and put my retention to the test. Gray simply watches me as I man the helm for a time, occasionally throwing some light trivia my way. He seems pleased with how much of his lecture I remember. Every once in a while, I see him check his D3 out of the corner of my eye. He pops the screen on and refreshes his message inbox. Finding the inbox empty, he stuffs it back into his pocket, only to do it again within the same hour. Though I'm slightly tempted to ask what he's waiting for, I ultimately don't say anything. Any talk between us stays largely focused on our work. "I think you've got it down, Grilly," he says as we approach the end of the shift. "There's a simulator room on Deck 6. Perhaps we meet there next time, and we can see how you handle rigorous flight conditions." I nod. "Sounds good, sir." Gray chuckles nervously. "Please, Grilly. You needn't call me sir. We're both ensigns." Yes, I know." Realizing it's something that I've already done several times today, I let out a discontented sigh. "I keep forgetting that you don't outrank me. You're so confident and put together. I feel like you should be lieutenant." Gray chuckles again, then shakes his head wistfully. "Oh, I'm anything but all of that, trust me." "If you say so, sir. I sigh and roll my eyes. Shit. I'm not sure I'm ever gonna unlearn that." Gray laughs at me playfully. Though slightly embarrassed, I can't help but laugh too. He's got the kind of laugh that's infectious. February 8th, 2322. The hour is late according to Endeavour's simulated day-night cycle. The overhead lights in my quarters are turned off, so the only source of illumination is the starlight peeking through my window and the light from the monitor on my wall, which I'm standing right in front of. I press a few buttons and a moment later a familiar face appears on my screen. "Noel!" my father cheers, pressing his burly face up to the camera. "It's so good to see you." He then takes a step back and turns to the side, calling out, "Come here. She just joined the call." 3 more Cody Mundys scurry onto the screen a moment later. I put on my best smile and greet each one of them one by one. My father, then Cassia, then Oscar, and finally my mother, who I learned arrived back home from Amargosa Station yesterday night. "How have you all been?" "Wonderful, aside from how we all miss you terribly," my mother says, speaking for the group. "That's good to hear," I say earnestly. "I'm surprised to see you home, Oscar. It's Friday afternoon there, isn't it? No classes today?" Oscar shakes his head. "I got lucky with my schedule. Everything's condensed to Monday through Thursday." My mother gestures to my little brother. "Oscar enlisted in a flight elective this semester, by the way. He was interested in giving it a try after watching you go through the academy." Oscar glances away shyly. I grin. "Hey, that's awesome, bud. Is it with Professor Kilikov?" Oscar nods. He's, very intense." I chuckle and nod in agreement. You'll get used to him, I promise." We talk for a while. Cassie and my father tell me about the latest development at the family restaurant. They say that they've come up with some innovative new dishes together which they plan on officially adding to the menu next week. I convince them to send the recipes my way, hoping that I can bully Enzo into making them for me. I, of course, know from experience that I didn't inherit my father's good chef genes, and I'd be a fool to try making anything myself. The last time that I did, it literally blew up in my face. With the help of my mother, I managed to coax some more details about Union Academy from Oscar. He's been loving it, but also returning home most weekends. He says he doesn't mind the hour-and-a-half-long commute between Rio and the San Francisco campus, and starts missing his own bedroom if he stays away from home for too long. I humorously recall how I probably did the same commute thousands of times for the same reason. Neither of us have ever been good at adjusting to new normals, even if it's for the sake of something we really want. My parents have always joked about how, behaviorally speaking, he and I are practically twins. Seeing him in the shoes that I was in years ago is like looking back in time. You reach the edge of Union Space tomorrow, right? Cassia asks, the conversation pivoting to my situation. I nod. My expression falls slightly. Sometime tomorrow, we'll pass the furthest comm relay. Not long after that, we'll lose the ability to talk in real time like this. Cassia smiles at me forgivingly. That's okay. We'll still keep in touch. It'll just take up to a week for our transmissions to reach you, Oscar adds, depending on where Endeavor is on its route. My mother gestures to him. He's been studying your mission too. He's very interested in it. I snort. You'd better stop his interest from growing more, or pretty soon you'll have a second kid vanishing into unexplored space. She laughs. Well, as long as you always come home safe, when you're done. I nod confidently. Of course I will. We say our goodbyes. All four of them express their love for me. I love you too. A smile. One last thing to see before. Beep-up. The call ends. I turn my monitor off and take a seat at my bed, the room much darker now. The quiet envelops me. That's it. Nothing but day-old pre-recorded messages between us for the next 4 years. Thinking about it makes me sick at my stomach. I let my weight drop, plopping onto the bed sideways. I reach for a pillow and stuff it under my head, not bothering to correct my posture. I have half a mind to page Enzo and ask if he's free to come to my quarters. Or maybe rush back to the monitor and call my family again before their attention is occupied elsewhere. The loneliness feels more tangible now than it has at any of the days prior. It's like I can feel it all around me, suffocating me slowly. Just one question races through my mind for what feels like hours. How am I supposed to survive like this? February 9th, 2322. I wake up late the following morning. Despite the extra sleep, I don't feel well rested at all. I lie in bed for a while, and it isn't until I remember how I'm supposed to meet Gray in the simulator room that I finally muster up the motivation to get out of bed. I make myself a quick cold breakfast, then take a few minutes to groom and make myself look presentable. Once I'm done, I head out. Halfway there, I spot Enzo out of the corner of my eye, as he is about to get onto a lift. Hey, I shout, rushing up to him and tapping his shoulder. Bom dia? The hawk turns around and smiles. No, I was hoping I'd find you, actually. Oh? He nods. I was wondering if you'd like to get dinner tonight in the mess, maybe around 1800 hours? There's a friend that I made in the science division who I invited to. Her name's Bella. I think you'd like her. I nod eagerly, elated by the thought of making a new friend. Sure, I'd like that. Then I cock an eyebrow at him. Just to be clear, though, was 1800 hours the time that you gave her to? Yes, I believe so. Enzo answers, obviously. Tell her 1845. Why? Because that's when you'll actually be there, I reply, rolling my eyes. Didn't you learn anything from our time at the academy? Enzo sighs deeply. Why must you punctually be so complicated? I chuckle and shake my head. Trust me, I feel you. I part with Enzo, resuming my route to the simulator room, arriving there a few minutes later. It's a small dark room with a flight console and a large monitor that curves around its horizon, mimicking the bridge's view. Gray's already there, sitting in the co-pilot seat. Hey, Grilly. Hello. I take a seat. How are you doing today? I'm alright, he says. I've been sleeping better, at least. Are you holding up well? For the most part, yes. He looks up at me with a hint of concern. I nod reassuringly and say, I'm still settling in, you know? There's a lot that I'm still getting used to. Of course, I understand, he says. In any case, are you ready? This, of course, won't be like the conditions that you saw on the bridge. That was smooth sailing. Here, I'll be presenting you with a variety of scenarios, some of them dangerous. You'll have to respond with the safety of Endeavor and her crew in mind at all times. I take a deep breath. You've got this, Grilly. You're a good pilot. You've got good judgment, and your reflexes are on point. It's just a different flight console and a much bigger ship. Everything else should be as familiar as the back of your hand. Sufficiently bolstered by my own pep talk, I nod confidently. I'm ready. Gray taps a few buttons on his console and the first scenario begins. In it, I have to pilot through an ion storm. It's dangerous if not handled well, but thankfully I have a lot of practice with these, and the prior experience pays off. Gray commends my performance. In the second scenario, Endeavor encounters a mysterious alien vessel and attempts to contact it, yielding nothing but radio silence. I know I have to be careful. Any sudden moves on my part aggravate the alien ship and result in a violent confrontation. My approach needs to be defensive, but subtle. Even though I know it's just a simulation, it stresses the hell out of me. But thankfully, I managed to complete the scenario without inciting ship-to-ship combat. Though Gray praises my performance again, he also gives me some constructive feedback and points out a few things that I can focus on improving for next time. At this point, about 3 hours have passed. Perhaps you could do with a break, Gray suggests kindly. The last one put you on the edge, it seems. I chuckle and swipe the sweat from my brow. I wouldn't mind that at all, thank you. I pull out a snack that I brought with me and start chowing down on it, feeling rather hungry. Gray is quiet for a few minutes as he buries his face in his D3. I notice him check the message inbox again, refreshing it if not just once but twice, just like he did the other day. Then he puts away the D3 again, leans back on his chair, and heaves a big sigh. He mumbles, his eyes scanning the room's ceiling. What do you like to do, Grilly? I'm a little surprised to hear him speak. What do I like to do? Like, hobbies? Yeah, hobbies. Have you any? Well, I have a few, I suppose. That's nice to hear. I see him wince, perhaps at his own comment. What are they? I pause. A simple enough question that a response should come to me as naturally as breathing, but for some reason I always tense up when I have to answer it. Come on, spit something out, Noel. I like, gaming. I play games. I also play basketball sometimes. I got really into it at the academy. Gray glances at me briefly, appraising my height. I'm guessing. I suppose for my sex and species, 168 centimeters is actually nothing to balk at. That's neat, Gray eventually says. Games? Like what kind? I know those full integration VR games are popular. I nod. I've dabbled in those, but I'm really into old retro stuff. Oh, neat, he remarks. I suppose I'm into retro stuff too, but more so like, books, literature, movies. Oh? I say, letting a slight grin slip onto my muzzle. How old? Ancient is perhaps a better word, he admits. I can see him blushing. Many centuries old. Oh, wow. I can't think of anything else to say in response to that. Anything else? Gray asks after a brief quiet. I'm afraid that I'm not too interesting myself. I think for a moment. Photography. I like taking pictures whenever I go somewhere new. I have a huge album of physical prints in my quarters, actually. I like giving them to people. I can give you one if you'd like. Gray nods hesitantly. I like that a lot, actually. If it's fine with you. I mean, I wouldn't want to impose. They're your prints. Yes, of course. I'd be happy to give you one. I force a laugh. That's why I have them. Didn't I just offer to give him one? I notice his eyes narrow, and what looks like a hint of lingering guilt on them. He seems almost paranoid of inconveniencing me. The small talk between us is stiff and awkward, and while I'm well aware that it's partly my own fault, Gray really isn't helping make it any better. It's surprising because he seems a lot more socially proficient when we were talking about our work, but I suppose getting personal might be his enemy, just as much as it is mine. I find my impression of him shifting slightly from when we first met. After a few more minutes of break, we get back to simulations. Gray initiates a couple of more scenarios for me, one involving an asteroid field and another involving an... emergency crash landing, which is terrifying, but I surprise myself with an above-average score by Gray's own report. Alright, well, I'd say that's good enough for today, Gray says. I'd like to do a couple of more simulation sessions if that's alright with you. Then we can ask Kiori to evaluate your skills, and if they're to his satisfaction, he can start putting you on the bridge sometime. Sounds good, I say. I heave myself out of my seat. I want to thank you again. It's really kind of you to take time out of your schedule like this. I'm happy to do it, truly. He smiles and nods. You're good company, Grilly. I blush, and though my first impulse is to refute the claim, I decide not to dismiss his kindness. Thank you. We arrange our next meeting time, then say goodbye. I walk to the exit but stop just short of the door, noticing that Gray hasn't even stood up yet. I look back and see him with his D3 again, refreshing his inbox. It's empty. A pained frown creeps on his muzzle. Then he casts his gaze over slightly and notices me staring. I blush and open my mouth trying to say something. I mean to apologize, but it awkwardly morphs into a question. Well... Are you okay? Gray nods and gives me a wimpy thumbs up. It's nothing. Don't worry about it, please. I stand there indecisively. Part of me wants to do as he says, and part of me wants to stay and probe deeper. The expression on his face, though brief, looked profoundly distressed. And he probably has been this whole time, I realize. He's better at hiding insecurity than I am, but now I can see him vulnerable. It seems he's been feeling just as uncomfortable here as I have. I gulp down hard. Be brave, Noel. Be personal. I walk back over and sit down. I didn't mean to snoop, but I can't help but notice how preoccupied you've been with your messages, I say. Are you expecting to hear from someone? Gray quietly lingers in place for a moment, biting his lip. Then, relenting, he lets out a deep sigh and throws himself back into his chair. His answer is short. Yes. Is it family? I ask, taking a stab in the dark. Gray shakes his head. It's complicated, he admits. I don't really have a family. I nod gently. A partner? A friend? He's he's someone who means a lot to me, he says, dodging an exact label. Perhaps somewhere in between then, I think. I'm sorry, Gray mumbles, looking down with gloomy eyes. I shouldn't be laying this all on you. No, please, I'd like to listen, if you'd like to share, I assure him. It's been a rough adjustment for me too, leaving so much of my old life behind. Though I'm sure that much is plain to see, so I understand how it is. Gray looks at me, hesitating briefly. Then he continues. Well, his name is Gus. I started sending messages to him shortly after Endeavor took off, he explains. I was already missing him dearly, and I really wanted to hear from him again, but he's barely responded to me at all. I rub my chin. Is it possible that he's been too busy? Maybe something really important came up? Gray thinks for a moment, then shrugs apathetically. His work has always demanded a lot from him. Even so, our bond was close, I felt. I figured that my going away would be a big deal for him, and that he'd at least want to stay in touch, maybe give me one last ring before Endeavor's out of real-time comm range. But he hasn't. And I feel so lost without him. I've been trying not to think about it, but it won't stop eating away at me. I just... He abandons the thought and sighs wistfully. I can hear the shaking hands in his breath and the quiet but persistent tapping of his foot. He seems anxious and panicky, like he's on the brink of all his emotions simply gushing out of him uncontrollably. I'm really sorry, Gray, I say earnestly. I can tell that he's really important to you. You deserve better than to feel like this. Gray shakes his head dismally. No, I should have known better. I shouldn't have grown so attached, and honestly, that might have been better for both of us. I could have been a lot less of a burden. Hey, no, I mumble softly, frowning. I don't think that you should feel bad for caring deeply about someone. There's nothing wrong with that. Gray shrugs again, but bites his lips and doesn't say anything further. My words don't seem to stick with him. Perhaps the best thing for me to do is to try and pivot the conversation off of Gus, I think, and onto a problem that I can actually help him solve. Can I assume that you're lonely? I ask. Gray hesitantly nods. I suppose I'm not the best at connecting with new people on my own. There is some irony in our shared situation, I recognize. I can't help but smirk a little when I ask. Do you think two people who suck at making friends might make good friends? Gray begins, the question surprising him. I don't know? Maybe? Then how about it? I say, grinning. I'll be joining someone that I know and a friend of his for dinner in the mess hall shortly. You should come along. Are you sure? He asks. I see the guilty look in his eyes again. I wouldn't want to intrude. I'm sure. I stand up and offer him a hand. He takes it and I pull hard, grunting as I drag him back to his feet. Oof, he's heavy. If we're friends, can I call you Milo? I ask. He smiles and nods as he follows me to the exit. Yeah, of course. I wouldn't have minded that from the start, honestly. And call me Noel, I insist. His spirits seem sufficiently lifted, I think. For now, at least. We walk down the corridors together, passing some windows along the way. What do you think we'll find out there? I ask, gandering out at the stars beautifully sparkling against the dark purplish haze of space. Milo looks, too, and takes a moment to think, then shakes his head. I don't know. We could discover just about anything. Then he turns to me and smiles. I suppose that's the whole point of being here, though, isn't it? I smile and nod. That's why we all signed up for this. Suddenly reminded of the reason that I'm here. The reason that I've always strived to make it here. I feel refreshed and even feel a little giddy. Maybe the next 4 years won't be so bad. Prologue to Endeavor. Written by, I guess, Team Endeavor. Obviously, and thankfully you guys made it to this point in the rating. This is a prologue to a visual novel that's gonna come out sooner rather than later, I hope. And this is not required reading, but I'm gonna read it anyways because I kind of like reading stuff like this now. Well, not now. I mean, like, this is fun, I guess. It was fun when I did it for Soul Creek, and it's, fun now. Plus, it introduces you sort of to, like, the story that's going to eventually come out, which is called Planet of Ash. Which I guess revolves around Milo, actually. It doesn't revolve around the main character that you were reading right now. I forgot his name. Ensign Grilly? But yeah. Anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed reading it, and hopefully when, whatever other chapters come out, hopefully you guys listen to those too, or you decide to read them yourself. I will be posting down a link for these. Not sure if it will be the Twitter page or the itch.io page, but if it's itch.io, then, or if it's Twitter, then the Twitter page will have a direct link for the itch.io page where you can download it and play it. Or, well, technically read it. Although they do have a PDF which you can just download. Anyways, but yeah. There will be some NSFW scenes which will be written safe for work by the team themselves, so you'll probably just see the safe for work versions, or maybe the NSFW versions. I don't know. We'll have to see. But yeah, look forward to that, hopefully. And thank you for listening to this Prologue to Endeavor Chapter 1. Anyway, so yeah. I guess that's it. Bye. Bye.